Hello and happy Sunday. I hope it's going well
Happy
for you
Sunday.
so far. Welcome to our regular Q&A session.
Absolutely.
Matt, shall I read the first question?
Sure.
It's from Olivier in France.
Hello. Bonjour.
The SNP needs Tory governments to push left-of-centre voters towards the idea of independence. Should Labour adopt the following phrase at the next general election? Vote SNP, get Tory.
Well, it's a good question because it's certainly has been true that the SNP thrives under Tory governments. The exception, I suppose, to the principle was when Ruth Davidson, now in the Lords, was leader of the Scottish Tories in Scotland. And it looked like there might be a realignment, but that's not the case anymore. I mean, to the point that Olivier raises, Labour needs to pick up a fair number of seats. It's only got 2 at the moment. Edinburgh South and Rutherglen and Hamilton West, which it won in a by-election in, I think, October with a 20% swing. And I guess there are 73 seats in the Commons from Scotland. It would be disappointing for Starmer if he didn't get 20 plus. He needs a breakthrough in Scotland to take the heat off the reliance upon England. Well,
also just to get over the line, doesn't he?
Just to get over the line. I mean, it's such a big swing. So absolutely. And I think they might. Whether Labour will adopt that as an official slogan, I don't know. But certainly on the doorstep, it'll be. If you wrote SNP, you'll get the Tories.
I don't think definitely the issue, the sort of heat of independence seems to have diminished a little bit. Perhaps we can hear from some of our Scottish listeners.
Very interested to hear that.
And I'm sure there are, within big communities, it's still as vehement as ever was. But I do think it's probably, the cost of living and all the scandals around the SNP have probably taken their toll a little bit.
Very much so. And I think that it's one of those moments where, UK politics will be probably the first issue. But Labour has to make that happen. I mean, they'll have to devote quite a lot of resource to that.
Terrific. Thank you, Olivier.
Okay, really enjoyed your discussion about the post office scandal. Thank you. The thought I kept coming back to was, where was the trade union in all of this? Shocking that the Subpostmasters were not represented. Steph on Spotify. Thanks so much, Steph.
Yeah. Well, where were they?
It's a very good question. I mean, I suppose underpinning it is the fact that the National Federation of Subpostmasters is quite a weak body when you compare it to the Communication Workers Union. It doesn't have much muscle. And the noble exception to this was that in I think 2008 or 9, Michael Rudkin, who was at the time the chair of the federation, made the famous visit to Fujitsu's headquarters and worked out that they were secretly altering the accounts of the Subpostmasters in Horizon. So there was some representation there. But the truth is that Alan Bates, the famous Alan Bates, as played by Toby Jones in the Mr. Bates versus the Post Office mega series, wouldn't have had to form his own alliance, the Justice for Subpostmasters Alliance, if the Federation had been doing what it did. And
was that the scene? Was that the guy in the drama who did show up and was initially abused, but then told his own story?
I mean, what? I mean, the story. There are so many angles to this story, as we know, but it was actually a kind of object lesson in how difficult it can be if people have no union or organised labour movement to go to. And they felt, when Bates got them all together, they were all amazed to discover that they'd had the same experiences. Now, it shouldn't have taken one extraordinary individual to do that. That should have been a union job.
The iniquity that still strikes me as worth hammering home again and again and again is that everything seems to have been pinned on Paula Vanel's and her period. But this started a long time before she came into power. And, I'm sure it will all come out in the wash eventually. Hopefully people don't get bored of it, as people tend to get bored of big issues. Suddenly it's the major issue.
I think Alan Bates will prevent us from getting
bored. I hope so. But I think there's the wrongdoing. If we're going to learn anything about it, it's not just about kind of prosecuting failure and mistakes and corporate hostility towards its employees. We've got to try and learn something about how these seeds take hold. And the seeds took hold a long time before Paula Vanel's got
they
a hands
did,
on the machine.
And they weren't party political. I mean, we can argue, and I think we should, that this government that's been in power now for 14 years should have done something. A lot sooner.
Yeah.
But it was
went back,
set in place by John Major's government, implemented by Blair's and Brown's. So this is a murder on the Orient Express, as I think we said on an earlier podcast, and I think that's part of it. But also, as I wrote in the New European this week, that it is incredibly important to start looking in a very kind of ruthless and clear-minded way at the whole culture of outsourcing, the way that we give these big companies, that Fujitsu, who in front of the business select committee in the Commons this week, finally sort of admitted that yes, the technology had all these glitches from the start, and they're very sorry, and they're going to pay up some money.
Well, I thought that was impressive, actually.
Yes, it was, but the 4 people have killed themselves, 236 people have gone to prison. I mean, all this was known by them. Yeah. More than 25 years ago. I thought
just to clarify, what I thought was impressive was his use of the phrase "a moral obligation."
Yeah, no, because better late than never.
Yeah, but he's absolutely right. He has got a moral obligation, but it's impressive in the sense that they're almost alone in Fujitsu, this corporation, in recognizing a moral obligation to put.
Well, I suppose they're facing. I mean, they rely on huge contracts, including many contracts that have been awarded since this, and actually, during Rishi Sunak's
do you
time
think he might have been lent on a bit?
I don't know, but
might have been inserted.
I mean,
the
the problem is that I don't know about that, but I think it won't be necessary because the government and governments around the world will be very reluctant to have to, blacklist Fujitsu. Yeah, which would actually be, if you think about it, the right thing to do.
Yeah, okay. Maybe my impressive reactions.
No, you're right. It was the right thing to say, but I think that I would have liked him to have said it in about 2001.
2001, yeah. All right. Brilliant. Thank you for that question.
Data protection laws allow some data sharing for crime investigation. How much trouble will Fujitsu and the Post Office face if it's shown the real aim of sharing data was to silence critics? Thank you, Dave in Manchester.
Well, I've got no idea is the answer to that.
I mean, my only idea is that I assume the answer is a lot. Yeah. It's the case. I mean, let's generalize out of the specific, which is that one of the things that came out of the Post Office scandal was that things that were meant to be confidential weren't, and there was a porousness there that wasn't meant to happen. And I think this is going to be one of the great civil rights issues of the next decade, which is we hand over data all the time without a care in the world. And there is a sort of regulatory legislative framework, but I honestly doubt it's keeping pace with technology.
Well, do you remember the fuss around GDPR?
Yes.
Right. So, and I remember being, I was working for a local newspaper company, and we were very serious about making sure we were on the right side of GDPR because, the penalties for not being so were alarming. But also we were very nervous about, a lot of people are going to start saying we can't have their data now. But of course, the reality now is that every bloody website you go onto, it says allow all cookies, and you click allow all cookies and move on. So we are all blithely granting huge amounts of permissions to data collecting businesses masquerading as news websites.
They call it in tech world. They call it T&C ignorant, which is terms and condition ignorant. Yeah. We and I do it every day, and I'm sure you do too. Every time I go on a website, and if you're working at pace, you don't want to sit around reading T&C at all. But I think we'll rue the day that we did all this. And,
I think so. Yeah.
It is. Everyone talks about it anecdotally, how their social media feeds appear to resemble what they're talking about. I mean, what they're actually audibly talking about.
That's right.
Now, what's that all about? So I can't speak specifically to how much trouble Fujitsu and the Post Office will be in, but I think the issue that Dave raises is going to be of great salience.
There was a great example of, I think it was a Tory MP, I might be wrong. There was certainly an MP who had complained in the comments about how the level of advertising online had deteriorated, and he was getting bombarded with I think it was adverts for some sort of leather fetish kind of company until it was explained to him that these were all personalised based on his search history.
Oh, it's a nightmare. Well, I'm turning 56 quite soon, and my Instagram feed is kind of how to get fit when you're 50 with
that's right.
old men with 8 packs. Just click on this button. And it's very, very, very annoying. But also at the other side, life insurance. Have you put money aside for your funeral? Would you like to buy this cardigan? Charming cardigan or slippers? Like, leave me alone. I'm trying to be not ancient.
And we gave them all that info for free.
Just hanged it over,
just so we could look at cat memes.
Sling it over.
Thank you, Dave. I'm not sure we answered your question brilliantly, but we gave it a best stab. Next question is from Pete via Spotify. And just to mention, you can, if you're listening on Spotify, and you can listen on any platform, but if you are listening on Spotify, you can just ping in a question directly from the page you're looking at. So it's a good feature they've introduced. From Pete, what would happen to the future of UK politics if 200,000 moderate centrists joined the Tory party?
Or it'd be like an asteroid strike. I mean, it would completely transform the character of the party. They've got about 170,000 members now. They're overwhelmingly pro-Brexit, populist right. They pick the leader. The parliamentary party gives them a short list of 2. And they're reliably wrong. They chose Ian Duncan Smith over Ken Clarke, Boris Johnson over Jeremy Hunt, Liz Truss over Rishi Sunak. Now, Sunak has finally got it and is a disaster too, but Truss was a catastrophe. So the answer to Pete's question is that you'd basically be inventing a new party, a one nation party that might in fact be a good opposition to a Labour government. But
we've seen this kind of entryism go spectacularly wrong in the past, haven't we? Like Corbyn and Corbynistas into Labour, militant into Labour, and Labour certainly didn't benefit from that kind of entryism. Wouldn't a better solution be for those 200,000 moderate centrists to try and reinvent the Liberal Party, the Liberal Democrats or something, make them effective?
The reason I don't think it's going to happen is because, first of all, the Conservative Party's made it abundantly clear since Boris Johnson's purge in 2009 that it doesn't want these people. Yeah. And secondly, because, to be honest, there is a pretty serviceable moderate centrist party called Labour at the moment. Now, it's not perfect, and we've discussed its imperfections often on the pod, but, why would 200,000 people who are prepared to sign up to a party go to the Tories? It would have to be, if it was going to happen, it would have happened under Corbyn.
Yes.
And it didn't.
Yes, while Labour was
sort of flirting with the left. Exactly. It just didn't.
Yeah. Thank you, Pete. Next question, please. And it's from Jack Spencer, again via Spotify. Very good.
Great.
Oh, this is a good question. Controversially, can you recommend a centre-right podcast? I listen to The Rest is Politics, The Two Mats, and The News Agents. All I would consider to be left of centre. Is there a right of centre to balance my views? What do you think?
Well, 2 thoughts occur. One is, I think, if you want to sort of really intelligent mainstream right of centre podcast, Spectator Coffee House Shots is great.
Boo!
Well, I'm just
the opposition. Go on.
The question. No. But I mean, they've got a great team there. I would say that's so used to it. I'm very fond of it. But it is actually high quality. Jack's point about getting a different perspective, they really do deliver that.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd say, which is more controversial, is that I think if you want to really understand what's going on right of centre, you have to go to America, because the ecosphere of right of centre thinking now is not really the UK. It's not UK centric. Yeah. It's MAGA. It's America. It's how far MAGA, how not. And I would recommend going to the Daily, just as opposition researchers, finding out what's going on. Go to the Daily Wire's podcast. Yeah. Now, you don't have to pay a penny because it's on, most of their podcasts end up on YouTube.
Yeah.
Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens, Matt Walsh. You'll probably, if you're a listener to this podcast, be horrified by what you hear. I would call them DeSantis Republicans rather than Trump Republicans.
Yeah.
But what is useful about those is that they tell you what is going on in the kind of mulch and the stew of American conservative, and they're intelligent. Even if you disagree, as I do, radically with them, it's helpful. So that's my kind of recommendation?
Well, I was going to say the obvious one, which is a lesson in both kind of slightly right of centre politics and podcasting, which is Joe Rogan, I think. Just as a master of the art form. But the other one, as who is also a master of the art form, but is utterly, reprehensible, is Tucker Carlson.
Oh, yeah.
And
on X.
Now on X. And, if you want to listen to... when we used to go to the States on holiday, I used to love watching the Tucker Carlson show on Fox because it was so entertaining.
That's the problem.
And that's the problem.
I mean, it's interesting. This is probably the subject of a whole podcast, but Rogan is fascinating because you're right. I mean, he kind of nestles in that masculine right of centre world, and yet he himself
is quite liberal, isn't he?
Well, he is. I mean, he's a Bernie Sanders bro, right? So there's a complexity going on in American podcastery, which is these people are definitely not Biden Democrats, but they are. But they're it's got something to do with manhood and all of that stuff. It's fascinating. Yeah. It's a really interesting.
Yeah. So, Jack, there you are. There's a couple of recommendations. Hope that works for you.
Which films will you be rooting for in the Oscar nominations on Tuesday? From Clive Warren in East London. Thank you, Clive.
Well, I really liked Saltburn, I must say.
Enjoyable film.
I thought it was great, and I love Barry Keoghan.
It's murder on the dance floor,
It really is. But I mean, I did think it was a terrific kind of old-fashioned plot that it was kind of. You could probably work out where it was going a little bit before the end. Yeah. But I also liked the very last scene.
Oh, yes. Which has inspired a whole raft of mimics who on TikTok, I've not seen this, but, they run around their house to Murder on the Dance Floor by...
Naked.
What's her name? Sophie Ellis-Bextor.
Well, I thought that was a really good... The poor guy who got slaughtered at the Golden Globes, the guy who emceed the Golden Globes.
Oh, yes, yeah.
What was his name? Joe...
I can't remember.
Something or other. But he made this gag. He said, "Is Barry Keoghan in the house?" And he was, and he sort of raised his hand, and he was sitting towards the back, and he said, "Where's your penis sitting? Is it sitting up front?" It was kind of
I mean, fair play to him. I think Barry Keoghan is the most exciting actor around.
He's amazing.
And we're going to see great things from him. So my choice is, well, anyone who's listened to this podcast will know that I have a complete and probably unhealthy fixation with Oppenheimer. So that's the one, and we'll move on quickly because I don't want to do another Oppenheimer.
But an amazing film.
But the other movie I'd mention is Poor Things.
Yes,
by one of my favourite directors, Yorgos Lanthimos, who made Killing of the Sacred Deer and The Lobster.
Another great Barry Keoghan film.
Another great Barry, and I think, and it's batshit crazy. It's a sort of steampunk feminist version of Frankenstein is the best way.
Okay,
with Emma Stone in a performance that, I mean, if there's anyone who's going to knock Lily Gladstone out of that spot, it's going to be her. I hope she gets nominated anyway.
Brilliant. Okay, well there you go.
It's going to be a good. It's going to be a good Oscars this year.
I think it is. The quality has been terrific, hasn't it?
No, really good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clive.
Clive in East London. Thanks for that. And if you've got questions for us, please send them into 2mats@tnepublishing.com. That's 2mats, the number 2, MATTS. at tnepublishing.com. Don't forget your subscription opportunity to sign up to the New European for less than £1 a week. And that's at www.theneweuropean.co.uk/2mats. Thank you as ever to our production team, Matt Hill at Rethink Audio, assisted by Ollie Peart. And until our regular podcast on Friday,
have a great Sunday.
Have a great Sunday.
Bye.